I would like to remind everyone that this meeting will be filmed live or recorded and uploaded to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. If any public speakers on Microsoft Teams do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Members and public speakers are reminded to turn their microphones on before speaking and turn them off when they have finished. Okay. So welcome to the Community Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 25th of June at 7 o'clock. My name is Councillor Lucas and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. I have my Vice Chairman, Councillor Lee, to my right. To my left, I have Jen Gold, who is our Chief Operating Officer. We have Laura Kirkman from Democratic Services, and we have Natalie, which will be doing our webcasting this evening. I'll move to item 2, which is apologies for absence.
I've received several apologies, Chairman. Councillor Sharif, Councillor Yarrow and Councillor Markham.
Thank you. Item 3, substitute members.
Councillor Amos is substituting for Councillor Sharif and Councillor Burrows for Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you. Item 4. Do any committee members have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 5 is the notes of our previous meeting, which is on pages 3 to 6 of our agenda from the Select Committee held on the 19th of March. Can members agree that the notes of the previous meeting? Agree. Thank you. Item 6 is our work programme and terms of reference, which is pages 7 and 8. So really this evening we're just looking at the terms of reference, any comments to make. And I'd like to point out that items C1 and C2 will be covered by agenda item 8 at tonight's meeting. Councillor Murray.
I'm going to be on my best behaviour this year, Chairman. As soon as I saw the Chairman and Vice Chairman were two formidable ladies from Waltham Abbey, I knew I didn't have any alternative. But I'm always on my best behaviour. We're being asked to endorse this programme for the year, are we? Okay. Can I just ask, because, and the leader will know that I've been in correspondence, and I think I did include other councillors, this is the Communities Committee, yeah. And I personally would be quite keen to have some scrutiny or some feedback as regards this new Epping Forest lottery, because I'm struggling to find out about it, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm against it, because who could be against something like that necessarily? But I'm kind of struggling to see where that has come from and where it's been discussed in the past. And but I would at least like to think that it was going to be discussed at some stage in the future. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten the request. I would still like to know where that had been discussed by members and a decision had been made to go down that route. Particularly as I've been told by, and it might be inaccurate, but I have been told by one of the groups that went to the launch of this that this was probably going to replace the small grants, which kind of worried me a bit. So I certainly would like some scrutiny, positive scrutiny of that at some stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I think Jen Gold will come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Murray. So you will remember in the budget setting that we did last year for this year that the small group grants were reduced. So the Epping Forest Lottery is a way of increasing sort of access to funds for some of those small group that used to apply to the group grants. So what I will do, I think, is if we get a briefing note out for the Epping Forest Lottery into the member bulletin for now, and then if you would like to consider putting the lottery on the agenda for communities in sort of perhaps 3 to 6 months' time when it's had a little bit of time to run, because it has only just launched, obviously, to scrutinise later on in the year. So if you want to make that recommendation, that can go to overview and scrutiny for agreement in the work programme for later on in the year.
Chairman, and an important initiative in terms of our relationship with community groups. I don't think it'd be a controversial thing to review that in 6 months.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Could I just ask that you make a formal request for that consideration so that that can then be put forward to overview and scrutiny for their approval, just because the terms of reference have to be approved at overview and scrutiny?
So you're asking me to make a formal request now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I would formally move, Chairman, that this committee ask ONS that we do this select committee do review the community lottery after its first 6 months.
Thank you. Do we need members to agree that? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other considerations or comments on the terms of reference or works programme? Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll move to our first main agenda item this evening.
Mr. Marshall.
Wynne Marshall.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see that.
Just if you send any briefing notes out, I know it normally goes on the internal emails, so therefore I don't see them. Can you make sure I get a briefing note as well, please?
No problem.
Thank you.
Some of the briefing notes are confidential, but I will ensure that you receive what isn't confidential as part of your package. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we have the Housing Energy Efficient Retrofit report, which is pages 9 to 43, which was going to be a report presented by John Taphouse. So I'd like to hand over to John Taphouse, please.
All right, thank you very much. I know it's quite a wordy report and there's a lot of information to take in, so I thought if I just give a 10-minute presentation to summarise what it is and perhaps time to formulate any questions. So just sharing my screen. Let's see if this... Right, okay. So what this is, it's before we embark, and we have already started a retrofit project, but before we get into the main thing of improving the energy efficiency of our homes, is for everyone to be really clear about what we're trying to achieve from where we are now, and also to think about and make those decisions now about those things that we would otherwise try and make on the hoof as we did the project. So that's the purpose of the plan. So this presentation, it's 3 sections: where we are, where we want to be by 2030 and 2050, and how we're going to get to those 2 places. First of all, a jargon buster, because I think there is some jargon in there which I didn't explain, but the first one is this term SAP, which stands for Standard Assessment Procedure, which doesn't help very much, but what that is when someone assesses the energy efficiency of a property, they get a score which is normally from 0 to 100. So 100 means that home is net zero effectively. It generates as much energy as it uses. You can go beyond that. You can have a home that generates more electricity. We don't have any of those. But so it's just that scoring system, and I'll talk about that how our homes perform according to their SAP score in a moment. Some of you might have heard of EPCs because many houses, they have to have an energy performance certificate if you're going to be selling them or renting them, and that's a certificate that tells you how energy efficient it is and the sort of things you can do to improve it, but it's a very high-level one. This PAS 2035, that's a new British standard, fairly new British standard, but you're probably aware of stories of poorly fitted cavity wall insulation and these kind of retrofits. You fit them, and then a few years later causes damp mould. You have to take them out, and there's been some sort of scandals involved in that. So this was brought out to provide advice on fit in the retrofit, and so it means that we can only use accredited contractors, and they have to follow this process. And the idea is that we won't have the unintended consequences that we've faced in the past. So it's a really good standard. I've studied it, and but we do have to conform to it. Certainly, if we're asking for grant funding, it is a requirement that we follow that process. And just this term measure, it's really a piece of work. It can range from fitting a PV panel, photovoltaic panel, or putting insulation in, or changing the light bulb to a low energy light bulb. Any of those things is called a measure. So, where are we now? So this graph here on the bottom, that's the different SAP score. So the higher you are, the further to the right you are, the more energy efficient the home is. And then on the vertical axis is the number of homes that have that score. So let me see if I can get a... So we have some high-performing homes. These are in Band B, which is really good, but we have lots in C and quite a few in D here, but then we have some poorly performing. We have a tail of very poorly performing homes in here. Our average SAP score is just over 69, which compares with social housing elsewhere by very slightly above. But we've got the number here is the 2,374 homes that we estimate are below Band C. By the way, these estimates were done based on the information that we had. So we have some EPCs, the certificates, but we also have information on the type of windows they have, type of wall they have, whether they have loft insulation, the heating system, and we sent that to a company who analysed that and estimate. It is an estimate of the energy efficiency of each home. But although it's an estimate, it's the best we're going to get. It's enough for us to plan the programme. We're going to verify it as we go along, but this gives us a really good starting point. But that table on the right there shows you how much it would cost, theoretically, to heat the home to a comfortable standard, depending on the band of your home. So you can see as you go down, it can cost a lot more. And I've just added the bottom one there because in the next presentation, there's a line there which tells you that from the surveys that we've been doing recently, that over a quarter of our tenants are saying they're having difficulties with utility and fuel bills. And just a bit more on housing and health. A report from Greenpeace says that during the winter, 58 people die a day of cold. That's a coach load of people, if that's correct. And also, I think the link with the NHS, that poor housing costs the NHS directly £1.4 billion, according to a building research establishment, building BRE report. But they also estimate that the other costs, such as long-term sickness, or could cost the economy £18.5 billion a year. So there is a strong link between poor housing and health, but it's a matter of making sure that link is recognised. So that's where we are. Where do we want to be? So we've been set a target by government for all social housing to reach that Band C, the ones in the green, I think it was, by 2030. So what I'm suggesting is that it's a target, so it's not statutory, but it is a very strong target. I think we will be expected to follow that target, is to meet that, but on the way we take advantage of improving the ventilation, because sometimes some of these retrofit works can actually cause some problems in terms of damp and mould and so on, because we're making the homes more, we're taking away the drafts, the sort of that background kind of draftiness so it seals it in and we get the damp and mould. So we need to make sure that the term is built right, ventilated, built tight, ventilated right. So we ensure that we put adequate ventilation during the course of the programme. And then further ahead in 2050, well, it's legislation that the country is going to have net zero carbon emissions. What that's going to mean in practice really is our energy is going to come from electricity that's generated by something other than fossil fuels, by wind, solar, nuclear, and so on. Most of our homes are heated by gas. Gas is about 3 or 4 times cheaper than electricity, so we've got to make sure our homes are going to be affordable to be heated by electricity. So that's why I'm using the term ready for net zero rather than our homes being net zero. So to get to 2030, to get everyone to a band C, so we're trying to get, let's see if I can get my cursor there, all of these ones in the yellow, orange and reds up into the greens. Some are very close. These ones here that are just sort of 1, 2, 3 points away, so I've lost my cursor now. These ones here that are 1, 2, 3 points away from B and the C, usually would only need a loft top up or low energy light bulbs or better improved heating controls that we can do quite quickly with an investment of £2,000 or less. So we just go on with those. We don't seek grant funding for those ones because the grant funding, although we might get some income in, it's more expensive in that you've got to follow the full PAS 2035, you've got to use accredited contractors and so on. So for those easy wins, we just get on with it with our contractors such as Qualis helping us to deliver that programme. For workstream B, we think that's going to be about 1,300 properties. They can require more significant measures, and I'm proposing that we do seek grant funding for that, which means we have to follow that PAS 2035 process and use Trustmark accredited contractors. So the total cost there is 2 plus 14.5, 16.5. But with grant, the net cost to us would be, we estimate, at £10 million. That's construction costs, professional fees, and the assessments that need to go with it are included in that. So when we've done those 2,300, we'll improve the SAT rating by 11 points on average. We'll reduce the energy demand, so the fuel bill saving for the average one in that will be over £400. And we will be reducing the carbon emissions by about 1,300 tonnes. So it's currently, we estimate, so for that 16,500 tonnes. There's a few principles that I talk about in here to follow. I won't go through all of them, but I will focus on that one on the top left. So I've said our priority is to minimise fuel bills. Now, the alternative to that is our priority will be to decarbonise our stock. Now, and I think that's probably the decision that I think I want to hear your views on, because the effect of that is, for example, if we have a house now with a gas boiler, if we change it to something else, say the heat pump, which will produce fewer emissions, but might cost more to run. So what I'm proposing, when we have a gas boiler and it's due for replacement, we replace it with the most efficient gas boiler possible until gas is no longer an option, or heat pumps get better, cheaper and better, and then we can do that. And then in the second phase, going up to 2050, we're going to have to move away from gas anyway. But for the first phase, we stick with gas and make that as efficient as possible because we want to minimise fuel bills. We can do everything else right, but if we don't get the customer experience right, then this will be considered a failure. So we need to make sure that we have good resident liaison, we have good processes in place to make sure. And I've got a note there on refusals. Essentially, we need to do everything we can to avoid refusals because we need to get all of our stock up to a reasonable standard. So we need to be quite imaginative, quite engaging, but also I'd say quite firm as well. But there might be some that we can't get through the door, but we need to be quite strong on that aspect. And then just really quickly on phase 2, because that's a bit vaguer. So what we're saying here is that by 2050, all our property will be ready for that world where we're net zero, where we heat our homes through electricity probably. I know there's an argument for hydrogen, but really not many people see that as being something that could be delivered at scale to heat homes in the country. It might be useful in other sectors. So really, I think it's a matter of when we get closer to 2030 and we have to plan it, we have a look at the business plan, see what we can afford over the next 20 years from 2030 to 2050, and then determine the scenario that achieves the highest minimum level of efficiency. You notice I'm not using the word average because I want to get everyone up to a minimum standard. And the differences in phase one, gas won't be an option. We need to focus on low carbon heating, such as air source heat pumps or high heat retention storage heaters. Smart controls will be very useful, and we're expecting those to come on and be very viable. But I think the point is we would have done the easier stuff in phase one. In phase two, it will be harder. It will cost more for each sat point you want to gain. So what we've done, we've set out where we wanted to be. We used data to understand where we are, and that document sets out our policies on the retrofit programme, on refusals and gas and so on. And we now have a model for delivering that program, what phases we're going to use, what work stream within those phases, and how we're going to procure it. So if this is agreed, the next stage then is to start that procurement process of finding partners to help deliver this programme, and also to package it up so we have a programme of which properties in which year, and develop a sensible programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, one for your detailed report and also for the comprehensive slideshow there that really I'm sure has helped many members. I would also just like to mention we may have a councillor in the public gallery. If you would like to come to the chamber, you're more than welcome to join us. If you're comfortable there, then I'm happy for you to stay there. That's all right. But if you want to come down and contribute into the meeting, you're more than welcome to join us. Okay, I will now pass over to members for their comments and recommendations. Councillor Murray, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I first of all just apologise? I'm really annoyed with myself. I didn't pick up my notebook where I had made quite detailed notes about tonight's agenda and things I wanted to ask. So I'm going to have to do this from memory. I do apologise for that. If I can divide what I want to say into three things, let's go straight to the point that I think the officer is looking for some steer on. I'm very much in favour in phase one that we do what we can in terms of energy efficiency, but we have to have an awareness of what tenants are able to pay. So I think his suggestion about the most efficient gas boilers during phase one is the right one, because that's the balance between energy efficiency but also the ability for tenants to pay. And we were asked directly to comment on that. I've just got a couple of questions around funding. 16.5 million cost. I'm sure that can be kind of firmed up. How sure can we be that we are going to get 6.5 million in terms of grants? I know that's based on previous experience in other schemes, the report says, but how sure can we be that we're going to get that kind of money? And it says it just in a line, £10 million can be accommodated within HRA. I'm sure it can, but can I just ask the question that if we weren't doing that, what else could we have spent that £10 million on? I'm not saying that it's not something that we should do, but I'm just saying that yes, if the HRA can accommodate the net cost of 10 million, what is that actually stopping us from doing that we might have been able to do? And my third question is, I'm assuming it's because it's 2030 to 2050. Is there any reason why we haven't got any indicative, unless I've missed them, any indicative budget figures for that period? It's probably because it's too far in the future. But those would be my points and questions, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll pass back to John Taphouse to come back to you.
Thank you. Oh, when you do get home and find your notebook, then please feel free to send me, if you've got any questions, just send them to me and I'll do my best to answer them. How sure am I about the grant? Yeah, I just based it on, we're getting about 45% at the moment, and so I have used that. I've also been looking at, like everyone else, about what the parties are saying in the election. And if we believe that, then the funding should continue. So I can only be hopeful, I'm afraid. What could we do with the £10 million? Well, I mean, we have to do this, really. And I think I think we've got quite a cost-effective solution here. We're not going too far. We're just trying to get it to sea. So, you know, I just think it's something we have to. There isn't an option, really. I think. Sorry, I started writing your last one. What was the last question?
Too far in the future that we haven't got any indicative figures for phase 2?
Yes, I think it is too far in the future. Do you want to answer that one, Sergio, on the business plan?
Thank you, Councillor Murray. What I can just say is certainly earlier this year we approved our 30-year HRA business plan. So what we have certainly done is made assumptions around net zero or sort of reducing or improving energy efficiency over the next 10 years. We do have an iterative process to our HRA business plan, so we do look at that in detail at least every 2 years. So we have a rolling programme, and what we can do is we can review on an ongoing basis. We have also got a 50% stock condition survey that we've carried out. Further 50% of the remaining stock is currently underway. And again, all the information and data that we get from the stock condition survey also informs our business planning and the budgets that we have allocated against those different work streams. So it's a balancing act around all the different sort of information that we have. John's mentioned about being very data-led. I think we've got some of the best data out there, and certainly by the end of this calendar year, we'll be close to sort of 100% data. So I think we'll be in a strong place. But like I said, we will review that annually. Thank you.
Just add to that, sorry, I have run scenarios about where we could be in 2050, and sort of the tightest one, which gets really energy efficient buildings, but it will cost about 200 million, which I don't think we'll ever afford. But then something that's a bit more realistic, maybe getting all of them up to B, is perhaps something we might be able to achieve.
Thank you. I will just invite Councillor Bedford as portfolio holder if there was anything you wanted to come back on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd just like to say, Councillor Murray, I'll take on board fully what you've said there, and I've read through the papers quite extensively for this evening. And I think the main point here for me is the fact that we're being proactive, we're looking forward. I'd like to thank officers for the way they've put the report together, because it's about having a forward-thinking council, how we can get things done to improve quality of housing and heating, etc., for our tenants. But also I think it's very important to remember the little bit that slipped in there with the government, that they won't allow the sale of boilers after 2035. So if we're going to capitalise and make the best use of the money that we've got now, it's actually to get gas boilers replaced as early as we can. Because once they've phased them out and they cannot sell them legally, at least we can get spares for them at the moment with the backup market. So that buys us a bit of time. But if we delay doing this, we've got quite a lot of houses to catch up on, and I think we need to get that programme rolling. Residents will then see that we are investing in improving homes for the future. I did have one question though. All the way through the document, I didn't see a baseline figure used for the calculations of the costing of the gas and electric. It's not so important when we look at the document now, but I think with the way that energy companies behave when it gets to winter months putting up prices, I think we need that baseline figure so that we can predict any budgetary inflation costs that might come in to affect us going forward. They're always keen to cut prices in March and April and demonstrate the cuts, and then they're very keen to say, unfortunately, we're going to put it up again in November when everyone uses it. So I think we need that baseline figure to do some further calculations on. But thank you very much, officers, for the work that's gone into this report.
Thank you. Councillor Amos.
Thank you. Can I say I found it a very interesting and informative report, which I enjoyed reading. I did read it all, and I enjoyed reading it. I was surprised by the difference in cost of heating homes by electricity as compared to gas. I hadn't realised that. It was right it was rightly referred to ensuring that we get proper contractors to do the work, particularly in cavity wall installation, because they can actually make the situation worse if they're not fully competent and fully trained. But what I was wondering about is also reference to doing external insulation on properties that don't have cavity walls. Now, as I understand it, that's a very expensive exercise, and I wondered if we had very many properties in that particular category. Thank you.
We do have quite a few, and you can also do it to property with cavity walls. If you insulate the cavity and also the outside, that's possible as well. But the way, the scenario, the software that we use to work out what we need to do to get to Band C, I mean, we try to find the cheapest way to get there. And sometimes we might need to put that external wall insulation, but sometimes you can get to Band C without it, because as you say, it's £10,000 or £15,000 to do that external wall insulation, and it's quite disruptive. But I think at the end of it, I'll put some appendices about sort of breaking down those measures. So there are a few that we would do, but it might not be the major part of the programme. But if we do them, we've got to do it right. And getting it right, it's the detailing that's very important. You know, making sure you go right up to the top and you get down as low as you can, that kind of thing around the windows to avoid what they call the cold bridges. And so what I'm suggesting is the most economical way of getting to that C, which may or may not include external wall insulation, but will include loft insulation, which is very cost effective.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks?
No, Councillor Baldwin was
Not
first.
part of the...
Oh, isn't he? Oh, sorry.
Can I?
Councillor Brooks, please.
Yeah. Mr. Taphouse, I just wondered, when we looked at the graph of the council's properties, on the Oakwood Hill estate, where we've got a lot of flats and similarly similar age to probably Limes Farm, what category would they come into, a lot of those flats?
So I would have to look that up, Councillor Brooks, and up, but I can. Shall I find that out for you and send that to you? Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Wyn Marshall, please.
Yeah, I did report that the last tenants and leaseholders panel meeting, that I think being proactive in Epping Forest is quite remarkable and very, very good. But we are lucky, we've only got 6,500 properties. I mean, going to Arch meetings, we're speaking to housing directors from Birmingham and Sheffield and those places who have, like, you know, Birmingham got 56,500 properties. They are really struggling, you know, and in fact, some of them don't even know what they're going to do. You know, they can't think that far ahead. But we've also got to remember that we've got the mixture in this district of urban and rural properties, you know, and there's all those different ones you've got to take into account. Then you have to take into account blocks of flats whereby you've got leaseholders, tenants and privately owned. So then you're going to have problems out how do you put heating or restrictions in the properties that are tenants but not the leaseholders. There's all sorts of complications which have got to be ironed out, you know, but we're ahead of the game.
Thank you very much. I don't believe you was looking for an answer on any of those, but that was very, very good comments. Thank you. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Yes, I've got one question and a suggestion, to be honest. First, I think the government tried to specify for landlords the C rating, the EPC C rating, and I think I remember reading that it was very, very expensive and prohibitive for many landlords complaining that they could not upgrade to C rating because of the the necessary requirements. It did involve I can't quite remember exactly what work, but it's an expensive thing to do. So I mean, the first part of my question is, I mean, have you I mean, I don't know how many of our 6,500 properties are below C rating, but have you fully costed what it would? Is that the base, that level that you seek to get to? Is it a EPC C rating And have you costed that? So, and then I've got another question after that. If that's okay.
So yes, we've got just over 2,300 properties.
Sorry, yeah, thank you.
We've got about 2,300 properties that are below C. Most of them Ds, we've got some E's and Fs. And where we run that scenario through this software that finds the most economical solution to get them to C, the total cost is the total cost of the works is about, I think it was 12 or 13 million. But on top of that, you have some professional fees, you have some assessment work to go on top of that, which brings it to about 16.5, and that works out, I think, at just over £3,000 a property. So some will be, it might be £500, but for others, it might be 10 or £20,000 worth of work, just depending on what the current efficiency is and what type of property. There's also something in the report about if it is a lot, then we might just consider that property. Is that a property that we want to keep? Because it's going to cost so much to it, and maybe it's not a property that performs very well anyway. It's not a place where people want to live or whatever. So we might consider those options and divest of that property and use the proceeds for maybe new properties or in the retrofit programme.
Please do, yeah.
Thank you. And the second thing I'd like to say is that, I've heard people go on and on about air source heat pumps. And I think there's a great deal of problems with air source heat pumps. First of all, they are quite a complicated piece of engineering. And the more complex the engineering, that means that the costs go up in terms of the installation and the requirements of specialised contractors. And that also means that the future maintenance costs. I always think that we do need to bear in mind about maintenance costs in the future, because that can be significant, those kinds of costs. They are also, again, it's a wet system. It involves pumping hot water through radiators. And I think there's many disadvantages to this kind of convection system. I'm kind of leading up to a suggestion I want to make. And also there's the noise level as well, because DBs, to the air source, they do require an external, it's like a fan, isn't it, to extract the heat from the air, of course, which in the winter there isn't really much heat to be extracted. So I do believe they become very, very inefficient during the winter. And I think, I won't enumerate all the disadvantages I think there are with air source heat pumps. Very, very expensive. I would suggest another solution, which I use myself, and which is very, very cheap to buy, very cheap to install, and very efficient, runs on electricity. I use them myself, and so I can vouch for their efficacy. And that is far infrared panels. And that never gets mentioned. They're not the same as like a short infrared panel. They don't glow red or anything like that. But they are, and I haven't got shares in any far infrared panel manufacturers, but I do think they're a wonderful source of heating. And I have read that if a house could vote for a heating system, it would be far infrared, and that they are in fact very, very healthy. They do not produce mould. They do not. Hot air does not. You do not get a convection effect, and they are a very good form of heating. And I wondered, is that something you would look into? Because I use them myself, and absolutely, I'm really, really, chuffed with them. Thank you.
Yeah, so first on heat pumps, you're right about them being complex, expensive, noisy, but also they take up a lot of space as well. And we're already thinking about that. We're working with Qualis so that when they replace the kitchen, they think, well, if and when we put the heat pump in, where are we going to put the hot water cylinder? Where will the heat pump go? Where will the pipe runs go? Do the radiators need increasing in size? So it is expensive and complex. But yeah, that's an interesting point, because a place I've worked for previously is experimenting with infrared wallpaper. Actually, it doesn't actually go on the wall, it goes on the ceiling. So it's just like wallpaper on the ceiling. And the selling of picture of that is it doesn't heat up the room, but it heats up the person. And so there are some benefits. So they've done a couple of ones. So what I might do is contact them and see how that pilot's going. But they haven't really gained much traction. Since then, I haven't heard of anyone else using them. But I'll have a look, see how that's going, and it might be an option. But yeah, I'll investigate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Allgood, please.
Yes, thank you. A couple of observations. I like what Councillor Bedford said about forward planning, and I keep hearing you using the word economical. And I can think of when they built the M25 and they said, you know what, 2 lanes is definitely enough, we won't need any more than that. Several years along the line, they go 3 lanes, definitely won't need more than that. And it won't be long before they say 5 lanes, etc. So my point is on this. We are saying, yeah, let's get all our stuff up to band D. Should we not increase our expectations and go, look, do you know what, by 2035, they're going to say we want it up to EF. So I appreciate economical is a factor, but maybe if external cladding is inconvenience, but it takes it to a band B, band C plus, then perhaps we should be looking at that and making our average right above the board rather than just waiting to be told and then going, do you know what, it's expensive doing it once and now we're doing it again and let's just go, it's going to be expensive, let's just do it. So that's just an observation. I think we should forward plan, but rather than just accepting what's good, let's go for it, because we will have this conversation in 10 years' time, and I think we will be wasting some of the time that we're doing now. So that's point 1. Secondly, I think during the cold period, when all the boilers break down, there's this usual status of there aren't enough parts around at this time of year. So if we're going to do this, can we procure the same manufacturer and buy a lot of them so that when they start breaking down, we've actually got the parts, because it's been shambolic up to this stage where we've got 5 or 6 different manufacturers and we just don't seem to have the parts and none of them are transferable. So can I ask that we do that? And I think, yeah, no, that's it. I'll just make those points.
Councillor Allgood, could you just turn your microphone off, please? Thank you.
Yeah, on your first point with the M25 analogy, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It would be great if we had the money to do more. But what we do, and part of that PAS 2035, is that all homes are to have a medium-term improvement plan, they call it. So when we do that retrofit assessment, because what I've shown you here is theoretical, but what we need to do is, when we have that list of homes, someone goes around, do a detailed survey by a professional retrofit assessor, work out actually what actually will get it to a C, but also set out what else we need to do for 2050 so that we don't have any regrets. So it's a no regret. We don't put something in and then realise we're going to take it out and replace it with something else. So there will be that no regrets aspect to the medium term plan. So that's built into the PAS 2035. So I hope that helps, but yeah, I would love to kind of do it all now and get it up to that standard. But you know, the business plan just couldn't manage that. And as for standard makes, so that we can, for repairs, we're already talking about not just with boilers, but with all other things. We're working with Qualis to standardise, to have standard specifications so that we know what we want, and so that we're really clear about what we want, and decide on the best boiler, for example, bus maker boiler, and maybe if we decide on that one, we get a better deal because we can promise them the volume, and then they will make sure that the parts are available through the materials supplier as well, and so that when it breaks down, we meet our target of fixing them within a very short period of time. So, and we'll do that with when we do the retrofit. If we do come to do heat pumps, we'll have a session where we work out, well, what make of heat pump are we going to go with, and we'll procure it in that way, find out which one gives us the best performance and best value, and provides the best aftercare service as well.
Thank you. Councillor Nuriki, welcome. Could I just ask, do you have any declarations of interest on tonight's agenda?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Wynne Marshall, please.
Yeah, just for information, really, it's when people think of alternative forms of heating, they automatically think of heat source pumps. But generally, from what I've been speaking to with other councils, they're all shying away from that at the moment because the technology isn't there. The costs aren't there, the way they operate are not functioning properly, the noise levels. So not many councils are actually going for that. They're all looking for alternative routes, which is what we are doing in Epping as well. But so it's just for information, let you know that that's not the easiest route, and most people are shying away at the moment.
Thank you. Would you like to, is there anything to come? No, just comments again. Thank you. Okay, is there any other questions or comments or recommendations? So this report, I believe, will now go to Cabinet, and any comments that have been put forward or recommendations will be uploaded before it does go to Cabinet. So thank you all very much for your input. We'll now move to item 8, which is our Housing and Property Services Year-End Performance and Tenant Satisfaction Measures Outcome, which is pages 44 to 51 on the agenda, and it's going to be introduced by Sergit Baller. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's the report that I've set out, and it's our first sort of annual report. But before I go into some of the detail, just probably certainly for new members, probably just give a little précis of where we've been over the last 12 months or so. So there's been an awful lot of activity around housing, around social housing, and certainly from the regulator. In the last 12 months or so, we've had a lot of activity through Scrutiny and through Cabinet. We've had a whole suite of compliance policies for each of the 6 key areas. So they were done last year. We've had a new asset management strategy that was endorsed and adopted earlier this calendar year. So that was a key piece of work that we've had done. We've brought on board a new housing IT system. We've also brought on board a new compliance system as well. So therefore, a lot of our information is held electronically. We've carried out a new set of tenant satisfaction measures, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. But again, a very new set of surveys that were to bring about some standardisation by the regulator. We've onboarded our membership with Housemark, so that's a national social housing benchmarking sort of organisation, so that we can really test where we are around performance and value. So that's a really key piece. Through these ways of working, we've become increasingly data-led. So it's really about the data and the information that we hold within our systems. We've increased a lot of the visibility around our data, our performance with officers, with members, and also with our tenants. And we're working closely with a tenant and leaseholder sort of panel in that space as well. I've also looked with my teams to develop a new set of performance measures, a whole suite around sort of measures as well as indicators for the current year that we're in. And what we've done is we've really done a very detailed assessment around how ready we are for the new regulatory regime that's already upon us. That sort of came into place in April of this year. So the last 12 months or so, I've seen quite a volume of activity and work and engagement really through members over the last year. And certainly I'll say thank you for that, because it's really put us into a far better position. But that's just a little summary of where we've been. So in terms of this report then, there's 3 key areas that I'll be sort of talking through in a moment. One is around performance. That's within our housing management activities. That's things like sort of lettings, rents, etc. I'll then go through a section in terms of compliance. So that's really about our performance around health and safety of our buildings, things like gas safety, electrical safety. And then I'll talk us through the tenant satisfaction measures. Again, a very new survey, and I'll go into that in a bit of detail in a moment. In terms of the tenant satisfaction measures, should I say, I did circulate a member briefing not too sort of long ago, probably about a week, 10 days ago. So all our members will have had a copy of a tenant-friendly version of the tenant satisfaction measures, telling you where our position is and what some of our performance has been in that space. And in fact, today, so we've got some comparative data. So I'll be able to share some of that with you when I go through that section of the report in a moment. But again, that is a perceptions-based report is very different, or can be different, to a transactional sort of survey. So when I go through that data in a moment and Ben goes through some of the Qualis data, one is transactional, as in you've had a piece of work done this week, or you've had a tap repaired, or a repair to a door, and a survey's done then. Whereas a tenant satisfaction measures survey is about perceptions, as in, did you have a survey or a repair done in the last 12 months? If so, how did you feel about it? So two very different ways of looking at things, but equally, very, very important. So in terms of our housing sort of performance then, there's a summary in Table 1, and what that does, it gives a breakdown of where we've been or where we landed at the end of the year. So if I take off the sort of top figure, and I don't propose to go through every line in that table line by line, I'll happily take questions. So I'll pause after each of the three sections so that you can ask questions or maybe get a bit of additional information. So if I take the very top line in that table then, in terms of our current rent arrears, so our performance, sort of our target was 1.6%. So our rent roll is just under 40 million. So 39.7 million pound per year is what our income team is looking to sort of recover through rents and service charges in any 1 year, or thereabout. Where we finished our performance at the end of the year, so that was 1.31%. So what that equates to in terms of cash money is 519,000, is what we were still continuing to pursue by the end of the year. So that was sort of our performance against a target of 1.6%. That's a very good position to be in. This is my 32nd year in housing, and probably my 12th year at a very senior level. And what I would say is arrears at 1.3 are certainly some of the strongest I've been in terms of the last three organisations I've been in. So I'm really pleased with that performance, certainly given that we brought on board a new sort of housing IT system over the last year as well. There is some other details within that table. I'll pick out a couple in particular. In terms of sort of number of families in bed and breakfast, so some of these targets are statutory figures that that as a council we shouldn't be breaching. So, for example, if we do have a family with children that approach us as homeless, whilst we're going through that process of assessing, we might place them in bed and breakfast, temporary accommodation, well, certainly bed and breakfast or hotel accommodation. We're not supposed to have any families over 6 weeks in that type of accommodation because it's not suitable. And I'm pleased to say we didn't have that happen in any other case in the last year. So that was really, really good sort of for us to have. We've had challenges sometimes around voids, but again, we've still had a very good, strong voids letting process. There's 2 or 3 key parts around voids. One is around what we do during the notice period to try and sort of prevent a void taking place. There's the physical work that needs to be done, and then there's all the lettings work that needs to be done as well. So we combine all that information together. So overall, it might take us sort of 25, 30 days or so. But when we have a property that's actually available to let, really is key to make sure that if it's ready and keys are ready, that we don't lose any time on those properties. And again, we've been in a good, strong position around that. And if I just probably pick out a couple of other ones, home ownership. So if we get an application for a right to buy, again, statutory sort of timescales around that in terms of how quickly you must sort of administer and look through an application and the timelines around that. So again, we had 100% performance around that. Not every house is sort of sold through that route, but we do have tight timelines around that. And then the last item really is around complaints. And this is around our complaints process rather than the complaints outcomes. So this is where I think we probably need to be a little bit better. Our target is always 100%. So if someone complains to us, our target is to make sure that we can deal with their complaint within the right timelines, within the process. So again, on some occasions, we may have been just slightly outside of that process as opposed to the actual complaint itself. So there's some of the headlines that I've got. In terms of my key performance measures for this year, I've got a suite in excess of probably about 16, 18 headline sort of key performance figures. What I propose to do is in future reports, I will bring a more enhanced version of a performance report through to Scrutiny, because I think that's probably deserving of that. But if I pause at that point and just take any questions around housing performance. Thank you.
Councillor Dadd, please.
Thank you. I want to ask about lettings and void periods. It seems to me that up to 29 days of void is a lot of loss of revenue, and it doesn't compare favourably with the private sector. And I'd like to know what you think is the problem, because it could be, obviously, you've mentioned there could be several areas, and what you intend to do to improve that. In the private sector, it's turned around within a few days of being empty, and that adds up to a lot of loss of revenue for the EFDC, but also inconvenience and not having a proper home for people who are on waiting lists.
Thank you, Councillor. So certainly in terms of our performance here at Epping, in terms of overall sort of void period or lettings, we're actually quite strong. So what I can certainly do in our next report, or I can certainly sort of give some comparisons around what the benchmark position is around our lettings. But it's certainly around 26 days or 30 days. That is relatively commonplace within the housing sector. I think whilst it would be great to turn around a property with minimum sort of days, because we wouldn't want to lose rent, certainly on those properties. So yes, versus the private sector, it's a challenge. But within the social housing sector, we're actually in a relatively good place in terms of our lettings. Lettings in some organisations have probably exceeded 40 days. But anything, you know, in terms of sort of 20 or 30, anything less than about 32 days, I think would be, you know, that's an acceptable level to be in. But I can get some comparative data around that, should you wish.
No, the question really was, what are you going to do to try and reduce it rather than compare? I have got some knowledge about the private sector, and they certainly don't hang around when they know somebody's going. And I appreciate that we might be performing well by comparison with other social housing, but the private sector also has issues with refurbishment between tenants, but they don't have such a long void. So my question really was, what are you going to do to try and reduce that void time, and have you looked and see why there is the time lag like that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Forgive me. So certainly in terms of what we're doing in that space, so we do have regular meetings with colleagues in Qualis to look at all the voids that are coming up. There is preemptive work that we're doing as well around tenancy audits. So when someone does give us notice, we are looking at auditing their sort of property as well to have a look at the condition of the property. So if there are repairs needed, or if it's in a poor state of repair, we are challenging sort of tenants in that space as well to say, actually, these are the things that need to be done beforehand. Some of the areas that we have a challenge recently, or certainly over the last 12 months or so, garden clearances, so that tends to impact on the amount of time as well. So this is some of the work that we're trying to do to prevent us having a lot of work to do within a void property. We do look at the actual types of work coming through as well, in terms of our housing management teams as well. So there is stuff that we do within lettings periods as well, see whether we're able to do any pre-letting. So therefore, we've already got someone lined up for a property. So once a repair is carried out, we have minimal downtime in terms of letting that property as well. So there is a range of things that we are doing in that space. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I appreciate you've picked up on the fact that it sometimes takes us longer as a local authority to get the ball moving. I said, but what we have to remember is when we have private landlords, they tend to give it a slash, stack and jiggle approach where they go in, they just toss it out with a coat of paint. I know because I've been there and I've actually done the work on behalf of other owners who actually just want it back on the market. We're more interested in actually making sure the premises is compliant, it's safe and it's fit to live in, whereas most people nowadays, they just want a quick return because they've got mortgages to pay, they just want it turned around quickly. We've got a moral responsibility to ensure that any properties that we hand back are in a safe condition. I'm not saying that the landlords won't put them in a safe condition. What I'm saying is we take that bit of extra care to make sure it's fit going forward. And I think under the previous paper where we're looking at energy efficiencies, when we do get a void property, that's the ideal opportunity for us to be doing the work that's required to bring some of those properties up to the energy efficiency we were talking about in the previous paper. So I know that some of the properties that we've had around my previous ward can be quite difficult, quite challenging, and as just been mentioned, we have one particular one where the gardens are full of rubbish, completely full of rubbish. Now that does take time to organise, it takes time to get cleared, it's got to be made safe, and then inevitably when you get in the property there's even more work to do. Cupboards are smashed out, things like that, kitchens need replacing, bathrooms need replacing. It all does take time, but rest assured officers are working at the full capacity to try and get those back on the market, and we know it's important to all the tenants of Epping Forest to ensure that we actually get our properties that are let out to the tenants back on the market as soon as possible and occupied.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, please.
I mean, I think the officer might have intimated a little bit of an explanation when he explained it, but I was having difficulties with squaring page 46, the housing management target of complaints, 100% of complaints, sorry, 94% of complaints received and resolved, that's the wording, not dealt with, resolved within the set timescale. And then we're told, and I know we haven't got there yet, but I'm making a comparison, which is probably a wrong comparison. We're then told on page 49 of the tenants survey, only 36% of those that made a complaint, presumably, were satisfied with how they were dealt with. So at this stage, can I just interrogate, that's too strong a word, isn't it? Can I just ask what is actually meant by percentage of complaints received and resolved within the set timescale? Because resolved kind of suggests that it's been resolved to the liking of the complainant. I'm not sure that that's actually what it means.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, I mean, I think it probably goes back to the point one is around perception surveys and one is around process. So this piece here that I've got around performance in terms of housing management, this is how well did we perform against our policy in ensuring that complaints had been tackled in the right period of time, responses had been sent in the right period of time, and that an outcome had been delivered within that complaints process, as opposed to whether someone is happy about how the complaint was handled. And that is the biggest difference between this measure and the tenant satisfaction measure, which is a perception measure, as in someone who in the last 12 months has had a complaint, how happy were they with the way their complaint was handled. And I'll probably just talk about that piece whilst we're on it now. The sector has had quite a hit in terms of perceptions around complaints handling, and across the sector, I think it was just over 103 councils, satisfaction was at 33 and a bit percent. I'll give you the details in a moment, but the overall satisfaction across other landlords is 33%. So we came in at 36%. It's nothing to shout about, but what it does show is that we were just slightly above the median around complaints handling, and that's been quite an impact across the whole sector.
Wynne Marshall, please.
As regards voids, previously, and I think Councillor Murray will back us up, we used to have KPIs presented to the tenants and leaseholders panel, and one of those KPIs was voids, and we used to regularly interrogate the officers concerned why, if they were falling below the required standard for a void turnaround. Those haven't been present, but we have asked for them to be reintroduced into the tenant leaseholders panel meeting so we can keep an eye on the voids, keep an eye on the returns that we get in. The other point is, obviously, the Housing Ombudsman now has set time factors for complaints to be handled in. And again, it's one of those things that as long as the complaint is handled within the time factor and is resolved, that you met your target. That doesn't necessarily mean that the person is happy with the result, because if they're not, they can go to level 2. And we haven't discussed about level 1, level 2, or how many people have gone to the Ombudsman within the district yet.
Thank you for those comments.
Councillor Baldwin and then
Councillor Allgood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to void properties, it's going to be a bit of a theme here where I spend money now to save it later on. But when people take over the void properties, one of the things they sign an agreement of how they accept it, and things like no lay undie trees are allowed. But we actually give them properties with lay undie trees in. And Councillor Murray will probably back me up on this. We've got a situation where one has grown so far out of control, it's now too expensive to actually move and inaccessible. So my point is, I think we need that tick box check that we don't actually set up clients with things like lay undie trees, and we actually say this is past a standard, and anything that goes wrong from now on is down to you. But we shouldn't be sort of effectively setting them up to fail, because obviously I've got a tenant who's just letting the tree grow and grow and grow, and nobody wants to do anything. They haven't got the money to do it. But if we chopped it down at day one and it was never there, we could have done something. So that's just my point.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And that's a valid point. And I think it is about how we look at our lettings process, what we've got, and it's about planning that in advance so that we get a good understanding around the number of trees that we have that are sort of maybe tree species that we're not looking for, and then developing a programme around that. So I can certainly take that away.
Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, at the beginning you said, about housing IT system and how you're data-led, data-driven, which I think is a very, very good thing, about the compliance system and reaching Housemarque standard. What I wanted to know is, how do you react, how do you interact with the tenant from an IT point of view? For instance, if I were a tenant, can I log on? And do I have like a tenancy record? So would I be able to see all the work that has been done on my particular house or flat? Could I see its EPC rating? Could I see, if it ever had asbestos? There could be a whole lot of categories of data that the tenant could and should be able to see. And is it possible through the IT system that the tenant could report things like, if it's a communal flats, could they report problems via the online system? Is that something which exists? Right.
Thank you. And I think there's a couple of pieces there. So in terms of our Civica CX system, which is our new housing management system, there is an option in there for a portal, a customer portal. And I believe that's the sort of interaction or relationship you're describing. That's further down the line. So that's not something that we've installed at this point. We've concentrated on housing management systems, sort of rents, ASB, etc. And then our compliance around asset management was phase 2. So the portal will be something further down the line, but we also have our Fit for the Future programme, and within that, we are looking at what our digital customer piece looks like. So there is some future alignment and future work to be done, but that isn't something imminent. So just to manage expectations, so that's not something that will be happening within the next 6 to 9 months or so. It's a little bit further down the line, but that self-service option is certainly something around efficiencies for the future, and also around, I think, how a number of customers would like to engage with us. So yes, I agree, but that's a little bit further down the line.
Thank you. I believe they are all of the questions and comments on table 1. Okay. So if I just take us through to the second set of tables, really, and I'm just mindful of time, Chair. So in terms of the next set of, table 2 is primarily around compliance, and these are all our core health and safety set of compliance areas. I'm really pleased to say that vast majority of these areas are very, very strong. The target for the regulator is 100%. There is no scope for having margins or tolerances there. So when we finished the last financial year, we only had 2 properties that were overdue for gas safety inspections, and I think that's a good place to be in, and that number has consistently come down over the last year. We've installed a large number of carbon monoxide detectors, and there's just a small handful of properties yet to be done. The only piece that I would really draw members' attention to is electrical safety inspections. So these previously were on a 10-year cycle for some organisations, or the industry standard really is a 5-year cycle. We have moved to a 5-year cycle because it also becomes statutory as of April of this year.
As a result of that, we did have a resetting of our programme in the autumn of last year, and we had about 1,100 properties that were added into the programme. We've pretty much halved that volume outstanding as we currently, as of today, and there's a programme in place where we continue to sort of improve that performance position. And then the other sort of areas, again, we're really pleased to say we had 100% performance against all that. So I'll just pause there. Thank you.
Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you. Yeah. I just want to ask about the smart meter, upgrading to smart meter. Do you have a rolling programme of upgrading the consumer units or the meters to smart meters? I mean, could you just say something about that? I mean, yeah.
I don't have that detail today. I don't believe we've got a programme to upgrade to smart meters, but I can clarify that. Certainly not within the performance element of the report. I can always find that out. Thank you.
Councillor Murray, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a flippant comment, but I was just, when I read this, I thought, my flip. I don't think I've ever had any of these done in my own flat. I mean, it's not a council flat, it's my own flat. So I think when owner-occupiers have a look at all these inspections, I wonder how many of them actually have them done in their own homes. I don't think I've ever had any of these done in 30 years.
Wynne Marshall.
Yeah, regarding smart meters, it's not down to the council to endorse the smart meters. People pay for their own electricity and gas, and it's up to individuals if they wish to install smart meters, not for the council to decide that.
Thank you for that input. I believe they're the only comments on that section. Thank you.
Okay, so if I just go through the last section of the report then, this is around tenant satisfaction measures. So I touched on this briefly earlier on. And as of today, there is some comparative data that's been provided by Housemark. This isn't the regulator's position, but it's just those who are sort of part of the process, really. So up until at the time of writing the report, I wasn't sure. I mean, I sensed that our position was very good and that it was strong. So our overall satisfaction from our customers, so we had over 1,100 surveys completed during 2 phases. The overall satisfaction came in at 75%, and the sector sort of average for local authorities is actually 65.7%. So we're nearly 10% above the average. There's still room for improvement. So, don't get me wrong, we are still striving to get better. But again, 10 percentage points, I think, is a good place to be in. In terms of the surveys that we've done a set of surveys in the autumn of last year, and then I've done another set earlier this calendar year, and our improvement last year was 73%, this year 77%. So we've gone up by 4%, so our aggregated position was 75%. So again, the work we've done based on the information that we obtained last year has helped us improve that position, so that continues to be really good. Responsive repairs, again, I won't go through all the sort of tables. The sector average is 70, just over 70%, and our performance was 74% through quality. So again, a really positive outcome there as well. And the last piece, really, I'll sort of draw our attention to, really, and I think as Councillor Murray's already picked that up, around complaints handling. So the sector average was 33.8%, and we came in at 36%. So again, I was speaking to some colleagues in a neighbouring council probably about a week and a half ago. They came in at 68% overall, and their complaints were in at 34%. So again, I think whilst averages and comparisons, I mean, they have a purpose. It doesn't mean that we're not striving to get better, but it does give us a position around the county. So I'm quite pleased with where we landed. Thank you.
Councillor Murray, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have one general question around this, and I would like the housing portfolio holder particularly to listen to what I've got to say, which I know he does, and other members, and he interacts very well on these issues. The ward I represent has the same name since May, but is significantly a very different ward to the old Loughton Rogan ward. I've gone back to representing a large number of tenants, and that's clearly been shown in the last 8 weeks in terms of my emails and telephone calls and issues I've had to deal with. And it's linked to tenants' satisfaction. I just wanted to, it's a kind of general comment. I just get a feeling at the moment, and it's a perception, I accept that, so I'm asking for an officer feedback on this, that estate management seems to be quite overwhelmed. I've actually had that comment from another arm of the council, and it wouldn't be appropriate in public to say where that came from, that they felt responses when they needed responses from tenant management was actually quite slow. So I just wondered whether that perception was accurate and where we were in staffing of our estates, because I've certainly got a section of the Roding Ward that doesn't appear to have had a permanent tenant officer for quite some time. I think that's just about being resolved. So I just wondered if you wanted to make a comment about the perception I've gained since May the 2nd, that the amount of work that particularly estates and tenancies are dealing with at the moment is quite high. Do you feel they're coping, and what's the staffing situation like at the moment?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So what we have done over the last 12, 18 months or so, we have revised and restructured the way our teams work, and more recently, certainly we've got a north-south split. So that's something that's come about over the last couple of months or so, 3 months perhaps. We've also looked at the way that we handle ASB complaints, so again through a different team, and in terms of responses around ASB, satisfaction has quite drastically improved actually. So there's been quite a marked improvement up to around 70% around sort of the way that the ASB is being improved. I think volumes and caseloads are challenging. You know, some of the cases that officers deal with are challenging, and some customers do present with quite complex needs, and it's not very easy to work with someone, and there's no simple answer. And quite often cases are sort of worked on for a number of months, possibly over a year. So I think volumes of cases are manageable. I mean, certainly comparisons to where my previous experiences are, I think they're comparable. Although, you know, the challenges are still there. So in terms of staffing, we're at a full complement of staff as we currently stand. That we haven't got any large vacancies or gaps within our service area. We did have a period of absence which was significant. That has since broadly been resolved. So in terms of staffing, I think we're in a pretty much a full establishment at the moment. We are investing and currently recruiting in a resident engagement sort of liaison officer role. So that's something that's currently being sort of recruited to at the moment, and that will work with residents more closely in that engagement space. And again, through the survey results that we've had over 1,000 comments that came back through the satisfaction surveys, and where residents have given us an individual contact detail, we've been working through every single sort of contact, and that's with our colleagues in Qualis as well. So we've shared that information, and we've been actively contacting every single person in that space as well. And where they didn't leave us a contact details or address, again, we still looked at what that information is and what we were being told, and again, looking at how we improve our services. We're not going to solve it overnight. This is it's a long game, but we will continue to look at what the feedback is, and then we will continue to improve our services and mould and sort of adapt as we go along. So I wouldn't write anything in stone. So if in 6 months' time the way we're working isn't quite working, I would look to sort of tweak and sort of adapt that, because it does need to be responsive. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jane Gold's just going to add something to those comments.
Yeah, if I could, thank you, Chair. I absolutely support everything that Serge said, but I did just want to make the point as well. So the work that we've done over the past 12 months on 9 fields, taking a holistic approach to sort of tackling wider determinants of health on 9 fields, is going to be replicated on the Oakwood Hill estate as well. So the Jill Wallace is Directorate with the Public Health and Communities will be working very closely with housing staff, as they did on 9 fields, to hopefully make some significant impact. So we are working across departments and looking at what more we can do to support people in those areas. So when we're ready to, that piece of work is kind of being put together. It's not quite kicked off yet, but when it does, I think we'll, certainly be getting ward councillors involved in that and coming to you with a briefing and getting you involved in some of the activities. So hopefully that also provides a bit of reassurance.
Chairman, just for information, the officer, and sorry I can't remember her name, did actually give a very good presentation to one of the Loudoun Town Council committees. So Vanessa, yeah, Gaynor, yeah, gave a very good, very impressive presentation to Loughton Town Council.
Thank you. Wyn Marshall.
Yeah, following on from Councillor Murray's point about estate inspections, I know at one time members of the tenants and leaseholders panels used to be involved or get asked to be involved. And all the time that I've been involved, I've never once been asked to accompany anybody on an estate inspection. In fact, I can't even remember if an estate inspection's ever been done around my area. And it's understandable then why people complain when they don't see officers on the ground actually doing anything and able to speak to them.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you very much. I did find your survey very interesting. Just something I'd like to add as a member, really, and I do know that you know your housing staff are under enormous stress and they're short-staffed. But something that I feel a few years ago was a bit better is keeping ward members informed of sort of certain issues. I remember getting a call quite late in the day from Allen Hall that there was a problem with electricity on the Oakwood Hill estate, and it meant one tenant had to be moved into Forest Place for the night. And that sort of, I'm not necessarily expecting those calls all the time, but when there are issues in wards, it's just useful to be kept informed, really, of what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And what we have done, certainly what I've been doing over the last 12 months, where there's been quite a high-profile matter, there might have been media interest, or we might have had a power outage at a sheltered living scheme, for example. Certainly I've kept ward members up to speed in that type of capacity, and also let the portfolio holder know as well. So I think I can think of at least 2 occasions in the last 12 months, but it's not on. Thankfully, it's less frequent. But I take on board that point. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's all of the comments that have been put forward. So thank you very much. I assume that's the end of your report this evening. Thank you very much. Okay, so item 9, I'm now going to invite Ben Johnson, which is the Managing Director, and Stuart Thompson, Head of Operations from Qualis Property Solutions, please, to give us a presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Right, so I'm going to take you through the last 6 months in terms of our performance. So we're in the process of realigning the financial year to EFDC, so hence the 6 months rather than what Sergit presented, which is the last 12 months. But moving forward, we'll be in alignment. So in terms of the agenda, I'm going to go through some of the key things we've achieved over that period, some of the challenges, the end-of-year performance for the 6 months period, and then what's next in the next preceding 12 months for us. So in terms of some of the key achievements, so one of the things we're really proud of is launching the Community Benefit Fund. So you see in the corner there a little picture with a rail carriage, which is a really great project over at Upshires, which we donated £5,000. So that's going to become a community space which the children can use, but also the wider community within the Waltham Abbey area. So that's a programme that's in progress. And we funded 3 other projects. So one was a school at Ivy Chimneys, there's a Readers Writers Club at Loughton, and also Canal Ability, which was a sheltered scheme trip out. So small funds, those ones were £500. So it's really taken off. Really pleased with how that's going. That's a cross committee, so we've got councillors on that committee, staff from the FDC, and also the chair from the tenant and leasehold panel. So all part of that cross-making decision with Qualis. One of the things we're pleased we've been able to offer is we're funding the handy person and what was called Mow and Grow, which we've rebranded as Qualis Garden Care. So that mobilised on the 1st of April, and that's been funded for our efficiencies surpluses. So that's something that's transferred across that we're doing at zero cost to the council. Customer feedback. So in the detail of what Surjit sent round previously, you would have seen one of the reasons that tenants are less satisfied is around the speed of repairs. So that's something we recognised in the last 6 months. So what we were carrying was around probably 1,000 repairs over what we would normally be carrying. So that was 6 months ago. Pleased to say we've got that down now to 350 that are outstanding, and they're all booked in for June and July. So the way we've been tackling that is putting additional resource in and recognising what customers are saying. So we're getting towards the end of that process, which I think we talked about last time we presented. So I've got a graph that will show a little bit more of that later. We've completed a carbon audit, so that's given us a clear baseline, and again that's around supporting EFDC on the carbon agenda. So we're working closely with the EFDC on that as part of the carbon steering group. Materials-wise, so we recognise that we've had probably a bit of a challenging relationship that over the years with our current supplier. Please say we have procured a new arrangement, and our main supplier will be Travis Perkins. So that actually goes live on Monday coming. So there's a lot of work that Stuart and his team are putting in around swapping over, restocking vehicles and setting that up. Grounds maintenance, so that's improved in terms of satisfaction over the period, so that's gone up by 10%. But we'll do more at the place committee on that side, because really that sits in that side of things, but it's there. So those are the key things we've been working on over that period. In terms of the challenges, materials I've just mentioned, so I think we're very hopeful that the new arrangement is going to bring the service that we're looking for there. The speed of non-urgent repairs, so that's where I've talked about the WIP and reducing that down. Key challenge as well has been retention, skills. Everyone's in that sort of boat, which I know we've talked about here before. What this graph here shows, I know it's a little bit busy, but it tracks over a longer period the number of repairs we've got. So the blue line you can see there, you see my mouse tracking there, is the number of repairs that have been logged, so they're registered on the systems. The orange line is the completions, so that's tracking below, you'll notice, although it tightens up in the last 6 months. And then our work in progress. So we've been slowly growing that, but what you'll see there on the grey line is it's now starting to come down, which is the sort of 1,000 over. So we've been carrying a bit of extra weight, essentially. And if that graph, and we know that graph continues downwards into our new financial year, so confident that that will be cleared within the end of July. So it's a general trend, though, that there is more repairs being logged. There's an upward trend there. So that's that. Let me just move forward. So this is our performance over the last 6 months, essentially. So on the maintenance front, so that's the repairs. So we ended at 94%, which was where the target has been set at 92%. Again, as Sergio mentioned, that is a transactional survey, so quite different to the perception survey, which is about how people feel about the service. Grounds maintenance ended at 50%. Really pleased with the performance in the contact centre, because we have had challenges in the past around that, so we ended at 1 minute 37 seconds. That's our average answer. Obviously, we have busier times like Monday morning, so that can take longer to get through. But as an average over the week, that's where we ended in the last 6 months. First time fix at 85%. I'm fully expect, and you'll see that has dropped into the second quarter. What I'm certainly saying to our board is first time fix and completions will definitely be out of tolerance until we get into August time, so we get through that WIP, because it is impacted as you start to clear that backlog. So that's why we're seeing that drop there. Voids returning targets, so really good, strong performance there. As Sergio was saying, overall we're in a good space in terms of relet times, and you'll see there the average days were in tolerance as well. The planned maintenance budget was delivered on time, so that's kitchens and bathrooms, so that was good. And then on the grounds maintenance, so this is the joint inspections that are done in terms of the visual standard that we have, so those were at 100% as well. Sergit has already mentioned electrical testing, so we're working very closely around that in terms of access and improving that position. And gas was a really good joint piece of work between EFDC and Qualis. So we had 2 outstanding, which has already been mentioned in the presentations tonight. Moving forward, so this shows our complaints over the last 6 months. So we've had 75 formal complaints, 47 informal, so a total of 122. And what this graph shows, I know it's a little bit small up there, but it shows the number of repairs that were completed within that period. So the green line at the top is showing the level of compliments that we get, so it's around 10% of any completions. We get a positive piece of feedback where people say, you know, so-and-so has done a great job. And the red line, which is around, on average, probably 1%. So 1% of our transactions result in a complaint. We've probably seen a little bit of an uptick in the last 6 months, particularly around, as I say, length of time that people are waiting for repairs. So I think that's been the main theme, which obviously we're on top of and tackling. So that's that. That's just all that shows is a graph in terms of the performance over the last 6 months on average call waiting. So really pleased with that and how that's been going. So that trend has been generally coming down as we've put more resource in over the last 12 months. So pleased with that. Just to show that. So what's next for the next 12 months? So we've got our 6 corporate objectives. So one of those is around enhancing the customer experience. So we're working with Win and tenants around customer culture strategy, getting comments from customers around the service, how we can improve. We've got something we call My Qualis. That's essentially a self-service. So we've had to delay that actually because we need to get the Travis Perkins piece of work right. So we're going to be picking that after we've done that mobilisation. So that's around being able to book your own repairs online, if you wish to do so, of course. Looking at artificial intelligence, how that could potentially enhance the service. So increasing community investment, so it's about embedding and demonstrating the social value. So I talked about the community benefit fund, so enhancing that, enhancing our apprenticeships, and we also will be launching a volunteering scheme as well. So we'll be giving, which was agreed a couple of weeks ago at our exec team, so people will be able to volunteer within the district 2 days of their time, and we're going to create some projects around that. So we've got some thoughts about that and some organisations who are keen to do that as well. So that's something that we're going to be launching. We want to continue to develop a great place to work, so there's work around embedding what we're doing, I'd say. So, you know, we've done a lot in the last almost 4 years, and what we now need to work on is, you know, how do we've got a set of values, how do we really embed that into everything we're doing, from when we recruit all the way to onboarding people into how we appraise them. So there's always things we can do there. And listening to what our staff are saying around the feedback. And one of the key things we need to do is make sure we've got, and we've done it a bit piecemeal, but a more organised training, succession and development programme. So it's about how do we kick that on, really. Remaining financially strong, so supporting the council and also looking at where it makes sense, external business work streams. Enhancing partnerships, I talked about Travis Perkins, that's obviously an important one, and the other thing we're keen is around working with the education providers as well. And then the final one is around continue to decarb the business, so looking at the fleet wherever we can and working with staff around the carbon strategy and how we develop that. So I hope that gives you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we're doing. Hand over to any questions back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very interesting report, thank you. We've got quality in situation. Quality is where we're at, and it's important that we make quality work. And this was an impressive report. If I just go through a few questions that I've got, and then one comment I want to make. So the slide that has the 23-24 performance, I think that customer contact centre average answer time 1.37 minutes is very impressive, and I'm tempted to say, could you have a word with the Epping Forest contact centre, because I would like to see what their average answer time is, and my experience, and I accept that it's one person, but that's 100% experience for me. It's nothing like 1.37 minutes, so perhaps you could give some advice to our contact centre, and it will be interesting when we see in future meetings what their average time is. That's very impressive. Well done. On the next slide, compliments, 1100, and I'm tempted to say that as councillors we tend to receive the criticisms, and I'm really pleased. Thank you for the Teams meeting we had with your customer satisfaction officer as well, Deborah Casey, because again within the 8 weeks, which has been a bit of a baptism of fire. It's what I was expecting, but probably what I was expecting plus. I've received quite a few concerns, but they've been dealt with, and thank you for that. So in terms of the compliments, I would be quite keen to see some qualitative data around that as well, because we as councillors only receive, as I say, criticisms. So that's really good. And then I don't know whether you can say any more, or whether it's just kind of in your plans aren't fully formed yet. But I certainly would be interested in terms of knowing a little bit more about the volunteering scheme that you've got in plan for the next 12 months. And I just hope that that complements existing volunteering opportunities and organisations, rather than kind of competes for volunteers against existing schemes. But I think that's really good, this idea of a volunteering scheme. And then I would be interested in enhance our partnership with education providers. You're saying that that's within the business plan for the next 12 months. So I wondered if you could just throw any further light on those issues.
Thank you, Councillor, for those comments. So picking up on the volunteering day, so one example of an organisation that's contacted is the Oakwood Hill Estate Community Centre. So it's around decorating the hall there. So that's certainly one. And then another one we're talking to at the moment. These aren't firmed up, but is around Epping Food Bank. So it is about absolutely supporting local charities and organisations. So they're just two examples. And sorry, it's gone completely out of my head. Sorry, the second one.
Education links.
Yeah. The things we work very closely with New City College, so we've got a really good relationship there around offering apprenticeships. We're continuing to do interview skills, so we've done a lot of that around the secondary schools. Stuart's attended a number of those with the young people. So it's around that, developing apprenticeships, relationships. We're also on the partnership board at NCC, so around working with them around what employers need and us inputting into that. So we do see that as a really important thing that we're part of.
So I would say, Chairman, overall a good report that we've had tonight, and overall a sound and impressive performance. And if anyone's interested, we're in 39 minutes and it's still 0-0.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Ben. It's really about staffing, and I know the issues and short staffing, particularly in the construction industry. How is stability of staff and recruitment and that sort of thing, please?
Councillor. Yes, it is a constant problem, trying to get hold of good operatives and retain them. We are putting quite a bit of focus into that ongoing training, so we invest in them. But touch wood, at the moment, we've only have a handful of vacancies across trades. If anybody knows any electricians, I could do with one or two of them, please. But yeah, and a plumber. But yeah, overall, it's been quite good. It definitely moved, but it seems to be dropping back again. It seems to be becoming harder again.
Councillor Nuriki.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with my colleague. Very good report. But I just want to focus on the ground maintenance, where you say improvement plan completed and 10% increase in customer satisfaction over the period. I've received quite a few emails from residents in my ward, and I'll just read few lines from one of the emails I received 2 days ago from a resident, and he says here, grass cutting is a disgrace. To sum up, still a long way to go after a year of pretty poor, would you say? So this is not just a typical of emails I get from my residents in Oakwood Hill Estate, where the view is that the grass cutting in that area is pretty poor. So I'm just wondering, what is the measure of the 10% increment in satisfaction? What is this measured against?
Thank you, Councillor. So we've done, what have we done now? I think we're on our 3rd survey. So it is, what we do is ask tenants in the HRA for their opinions. So we did that the first time in May last year. We then did a subsequent survey, I think, in the autumn and one in February. So that's what we're tracking. We're due one now. I dare say, I don't know what that will say, because we're obviously in the growing season, so it's the hardest part of the year. But if you are getting those sorts of comments, please send them our way. We can then look to address any of those.
Thank you. Councillor Dand.
Oh, thank you. I wonder if you could explain a little bit more about your funded and launched Handy Person and Collis Garden Care and how that differs from your other maintenance work and grounds maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's the service that we inherited from that was previously being provided by the Voluntary Action Group. So we've taken on, there's 2 gardeners and 1 handy person, and we're currently working through the list of people who are receiving the gardening service. The handyman service, we've talked to the independent living staff, we're getting more catchment from there, but we're delivering services which are non-repair related issues, so things that we wouldn't cover normally for people who are vulnerable and unable to do it themselves.
Thank you. Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to know, I know that you talk about the difficulty for recruitment and retention, and I think it's very, very important to bring on board apprenticeships scheme is an excellent thing. I'm very, very pleased to hear that you're on the partnership board of NCC. I think this is an excellent thing to do, and also providing interview skills. This is all grist to the mill, and I'm very pleased to hear about that. I think it's important to have direct employees, and that's just my question is, are you using very much subcontract labour? Because sometimes it can be a thing with subcontractors. I'm sure they do a very good job, but it's not direct employees, haven't got direct control over them. They can be expensive. I think, are we still using subcontractors, or that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so, I mean, the model is we try wherever possible to self-deliver, and that means people are employed. So if we quickly look at the work stream, so grounds is 100% delivered by our in-house team, as is the majority, I would say probably 95% of repairs. Gas servicing breakdown is 100% in-house. We subcontract some of the installs, so we do some of them. So that's a bit of a split model. The planned work, so things like kitchens and bathrooms, we do subcontract all of that out. But that's not to say in the future that we couldn't look at delivering that in-house. And voids, we actually switched over in the last 12 months. So before we weren't delivering, we were doing about 20-25% in-house. But we've actually now, I'd say 75% we deliver in-house, 25 subcontract. So large majority of what we do is in-house. Not everything, but where it makes sense to do so.
Councillor Murray.
Sorry, Chairman, I did explain earlier that I forgot my little red book. Sorry, orange book. That's a Freudian mistake. A big orange book where I wrote down all my questions. Can I ask? I'm assuming that the position as regards recognising trade unions hasn't changed from previous years. I won't rehearse the arguments, but I just want to know whether the company has taken a different view or still holds to the same opinion.
That remains unchanged, Councillor, at this point.
Councillor Allgood.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 66, the 23-24 performance for the last 6 months. If I could take you back to the voids average turnaround time. I went around on the Qualis minibus the other day. Very informative that was. That was very useful to see some of the properties being done. Took us to a void premises that was being worked on, and I was pleased with the standard of work that was being done. So, but one of the things that they said was you have different types of void, e.g. ones that can be turned around 3 days a week, etc., etc. But this seems to suggest that you chuck them all in at one pot and then divide them by the number of days that it takes you. So surely there's ones here that are week ones, so I wouldn't be expecting to see a 29-day return. So should this not be broken down into where you anticipate them, if that's okay?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, what this is an average. So it's looking, as you say, we've got, I think it's 3 or 4 void categories. So we've got a 5 or 6 day one. We have got a 20-day, 25, and then what's referred to as exceptional. So what that is an average across the board. Generally, the average sort of time and is sort of the standard void, which is around the 20 days. Hence why it's around that sort of number. But we do have a detailed breakdown which we talk about at core group with the FDC around the performance. But yeah, this is a summarisation.
Thank you. I believe they are all of the questions and comments that have been made on your presentation, so thank you again for coming and sharing that with us. So item 10, which is just to note the date of next meeting, which will be held on the 24th of September at 7 p.m. I'd like to thank everybody for your input, really. Everybody that's presented reports, officers for your input, and members and extra councillors for your input, and especially the Cabinet portfolio holders as well. So thank you all very much. I'd like to close the meeting at 10 to 9, so we may be able to watch the second half of the football. Thank you. Thank you very much.